What is the worst tower in Tower Defense Simulator? I don't think anybody has to argue about this one. It's definitely the accelerator. Okay, I'm kidding. It's the accelerator is good. It's this, the freezer. I mean, whenever somebody thinks of a bad tower, this is what they think of. When, there's Scout, the first tower, we can beat, we can actually do some pretty good stuff on it early game. There's Sniper, this can actually beat Molten Mode. Paintballer and Demo Man aren't great, but there are some pumpkin farming strategies that you can actually do using the towers, and they don't work terribly. Soldier is just a slightly better version of Scout for early game. Hunter as well, and yeah, basically everything from there you can find a use for, except for this. There will never ever be a time where you want the freezer. If you want some kind of stunning, you're gonna just take electroshocker. If you're cool like that, you take sledger. If you're something special, you'll take toxic gunner. I don't mean that in a mean way, but the point is, freezer just sucks. And would you believe it if I told you that despite this being the worst tower, for the longest time the devs nerfed it? I am serious. They actually nerfed the worst tower in the game. And I'm about to try and use it to beat Fallen Mode. To make it interesting, let's just play on some random map like Candy Valley. Yeah, this is a dual lane map. Here we go, Fallen Mode. Now, Freezer is very fantastic in the fact that the same way as the farm, you can't see a damage icon. Basically, we're paying $350 for it to do nothing. When I'm saying nothing, I don't mean like, oh, it doesn't do damage, but the slowdown is something. The slowdown is quite literally not worth anything. And considering the fact that it's nerfed now, and I'll show you how exactly it's nerfed in a bit, I think it gives you even less of a reason to use this tower. Now the freezer, of course, as with most things in TDS, wasn't always terrible. Back when this thing was first released, this thing was kind of overpowered. It had an ability where it could freeze bosses. The ability actually froze enemies a lot, and it made some fantastic impact on your game. Also, by the way, I'm just now realizing that this is not the newer Fallen Mode. This is the older version without the beta enemies. So we don't even have double the enemies to deal with, which is why I'm taking the extra time to farm. Alright, but back to what I was saying. Freezer wasn't always bad, and still, as a concept, it's fantastic. Sometimes for enemies like Fallens, imagine instead of having to pay, I don't know, $5,000 to get a minigunner upgrade to defeat your Fallens, you instead only have to spend $1,000 to freeze the Fallens and make them easier to kill. That, I believe, was always the intention behind Freezer. By the way, it's about time to get Pyro. But yeah, I'm thinking that Freezer was just supposed to be this earlier on, kind of sorta not the best support tower. It's no commander or DJ, but noobs can pretty quickly be able to afford it and actually manage to help pros by slowing down enemies, that is. By the way, wave 7's coming up here. I do not want to tank any HP, so I'm going to upgrade my Pyro here. By the way, let me actually just demonstrate this freezer. Boom. Here's our level 0 freezer. This thing fires once every 5 minutes, and this is about the amount of slowdown we get. I'd much rather place down a scout than have to rely on that thing to help me. In this case, it kind of works somewhat well because it's able to cluster up the enemies for my Pyro to kill them easier. But like, do I really have to care about that? Because the Pyro is going to kill the enemies anyways. So again, not exactly the most necessary tower. One way they could buff this early level is they could make it shoot faster. So like, let's see. There's going to be a boss on this round. I'm going to place down a freezer unless the boss goes around this way, in which case I'm going to see how much this freezer can actually do against the boss. Alright, yeah, the boss is coming from this side. So let's say you're a newer player. Your teammates have something good, like Golden Soldier, and you want to help him out, but you don't have good stuff, so you put down a freezer. Let's set this thing on strongest and actually see how much we can slow down this boss by. Keep in mind, this is a really good freezer spot. And after that, yeah, maybe 1 second slower is how much the boss is going. Oh, also, I'm really forgetting that this is a boss that I actually have to defend. So I'm going to place down a minigunner for it. That's fine, 29 HP. I can kill it. 1 second isn't absolutely useless, but also consider this. Noobs won't exactly know to switch their freezer to target strongest, so most of the time, it's just going to be slowing down the enemy in front of the boss, and then the boss is going to catch up. And yeah, the freezer would have ended up serving no purpose, which is why I say the freezer should probably shoot a little faster, because by the time it does start attacking the boss, it can actually still get something done instead of, just hitting it like 2 times An extra 1 second inside of Mini's range would actually manage, you know, to get you about 20 extra damage, which actually seems like it's pretty good for the price of 350. This is only because we have one boss out right now. That's the one time Freezer can actually kind of serve its purpose. Now, you know what? It's about time I show you how they nerf this bad boy. Let's put down the Freezer right here. Let's actually upgrade him. Longer freeze. So this thing can now actually freeze for a while. And, you know, let's have this thing help out. Okay, so longer freeze, and you can't even tell. Well, let's try and make this a little bit more obvious by getting our defenses up at the front. Alright, watch this. What? Where's the freeze? Where's the freeze? When I was saying that they nerfed this thing, I was serious. Basically, now the Freezer's freeze can just get burnt off. At first, this seems like a completely reasonable change. I mean, fire and ice shouldn't work together. But think about it again, and you realize that just made the Freezer worse. That's literally what this change did. It made the worst tower in the game even worse. In fact, look at this. I could spend 1,400 for, you know, okay, wow, this one actually fires somewhat fast. And, yeah, I just spent all this money, in fact, $6,000, and, ooh, this one, now the stuff's actually getting frozen, and Freezer's doing 2 damage. Wow, arguably, Freezer's doing right now what it should be doing at level 1. Yeah, look at this. It actually doesn't help. Also, there's mysteries. I do have to burn those. We're getting quite a few bosses, but Pyro does melt the defenses, which is going to make it easier for my minigunner to take the enemies down. But yeah, basically, it's now shooting once every second to slow down enemies somewhat decently. In fact, I'm going to replace the Freezer here just so you can get a better idea of how much it slows down. So, like, this isn't bad. It's actually able to hold off the enemies. This was exactly my concern, though. Noobs, you know, they should be slowing down the boss to help pros, you know, do damage with the stronger towers. But most of the time, they won't realize, and a lot of the stuff at the front will, you know, just be tanking the slow. But yeah, at this point, Freezer is not terrible. Like, it can actually hold the boss here for a while. And if we had, like, a soldier here, the boss would actually be stuck in this range long enough for this to make a difference. So yeah, this is the intent of Freezer. Here come Fallens, by the way. This is like a great example of what Freezer is like pretty necessary for. And you see, after spending $6,000, oh yikes! I just leaked the stuff back here. You know, maybe I need a Freezer. After spending $6,000, we're maybe getting two times the amount we're allowed to slow those enemies down. But you see, the issue really starts to show when the amount of Fallens starts increasing. See, the Freezer has no problem slowing down one enemy. Now look at this. Freezer doesn't do any form of splash damage. So now the enemies are going to walk right through like as if that Freezer doesn't exist. The one good thing about Freezer is its defense melting. Pyro does the exact same thing. Basically, enemies like this boss have a 30% defense. That means they take less damage, and melting that defense off, of course, allows your towers to do more damage. But alright, here comes a giant boss. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade this Freezer to, you know, level, what is this, level 3? So at this point, I've invested quite a bit of money into it. Let's see what it does to this giant boss. Yeah, it freezes it for like a millisecond. Oh, and now that it's on fire, Freezer doesn't do anything. Like, I'm not exaggerating. It's actually doing nothing. Also, there's Fallens on this round, which I do not think I'll be able to take down normally. So I'm going to put down more stuff and use a commander ability. Yep, because Freezer, again, this is not going to save me. Because it'll slow down one of those Fallens. The rest are going to be free to run by. And of course, that isn't even going to happen to begin with because we have a Pyro. Let me get rid of this Freezer over here. Just because, well, it's doing me nothing over there. It's not even really considerably melting the defense. In fact, does it melt defense at all? Let's see. Defense melting. This boss is on 40%. Oh, wow. This upgrade is literally better than max because the fire rate lines up better for melting defense. Nope, this upgrade does not melt defense. You know, that's great. I'm spending a lot of money on this Freezer actually to be broken. The Pyro, you see, now the defense goes down. Now it's 20%. The Freezer, on the other hand, literally nothing. I can make the situation better, of course, if I max the Pyro here. This is actually like wild overpowered. But you know, it wasn't that long ago when both Freezer and Pyro were considered absolute horrendous trash. But pretty clearly, one of the two is much less horrendous trash today. Pyro back then would speed up enemies. It would not really do that great damage. That's why it was called bad. Freezer was basically the same thing, except at least fire wouldn't get rid of its freeze. Now everything is bad for Freezer. Not only does it just suck as in terms of how useful it is, it also sucks because the pyro is just gonna burn off literally every use for this tower. I mean, think about what I was saying earlier about like its purpose being to hold bosses in place longer. What's the purpose of holding a boss in place longer if you could use something like sniper and just do damage to the boss and kill it that way? And then when it comes to hordes, you're going to be much better off, because as I've already told you, this thing won't do anything against hordes. In fact, it's so horrendous, I'm just going to sell it. Now, next round. Next round is actually something interesting. It's a tank. Now, the tank, everybody knows it as a fast enemy, and it's really not easy to defeat. So I'm going to make a potentially not great decision of selling the pyro and replacing it with a max freezer. So max freezer can hold back enemies somewhat decently. Still not perfect, because, you know, when there's a horde, basically, if you want to slow down anything, it won't. I'm going to set it on strongest, and let's go. Can it slow down the tank? It does work. It slows it down pretty quickly. And look at this. With 2 freezers, is it going to be any better? I don't really notice a difference. Yeah, you see this? Yep. That is pretty disappointing. The freezer, I would say, didn't do completely terribly for holding back the tank there, but in a lot of scenarios, you know, the tank is not the only issue. It's going to be just a bunch of stuff coming at you, and in that case, freezer is not going to help. They can help out with this if they give splash damage to this freezer. But now that the pyro melts off its ice, yeah, that's basically just a straight up punch in the face to this tower. If you want freezer to be buffed, like, subscribe, and use star code E.